Alright, so here's a completed section of the shot. Okay, so I'm just focusing on this area just so it's a little quicker to demonstrate all these steps that we're doing. Now last we left off, we were at the model builder state, and you'll see now that I have the full truck ready to go. And you can see in some of these, in some of these instances, I built every single piece of the truck, and something that we kind of alluded to, like all this stuff that's underneath the truck area here. If we look at that, you can see all the different areas I have. I have the truck group. I have my rear tire. I have my front tire. I can actually turn. Oops, I can turn all of it off. Let me turn off some of these. All right, there we go. So I have the truck, and then I have my rear tire. I have my front tire. I have my back tire, which is this hidden one over here. And that also includes some of the other junk that's over here too. Basically anything that's on that same plane, just kind of hidden, I have that there. And then for the front tire, I have all the front tire stuff that's hidden, plus all the other stuff right there. And then I have the mirror as well. Okay, and for each of these items, we're doing the exact same process. I make sure I don't have anything selected, and I can go to here. The polygon one seems to have been a pretty good one to use for a lot of these shapes, except for like the square stuff is pretty easy to use, where we're just simply going through and just outlining a shape. So for this instance, I'm just creating some sort of outline here. And on my station, Nuke seems to be locking up, not locking up, just pausing, I guess you could say, frequently. There we go. So then I hit enter. Once I've created that, I need to make sure I'm in the align tool so that I could advance and then realign this with where it should be, and then advance again, and then realign that with where it's now going to be at. Okay, so there's 3 alignments, one right here at the beginning, there's one back a bit, and then one forward a bit. That usually gives you a good idea of where your stuff is going to be lined up to. Okay, so I don't need that, so I'm just going to delete it. And again, it's just pausing while it goes through this. When we get into this heavy math type stuff, sometimes it can just kind of bog the station down a bit. Okay, so once you have this entire truck modeled, all these pieces, I can grab all of this and then say bake. Okay, and then I'll get this piece of geometry way over here. Higher up, higher up, higher up. There it is. Okay, so this piece of geometry is all of that stuff. Okay, so you can see that I have the truck. Now it's going to look a little funny in here. You can see that it doesn't look like the alignment of the actual truck. But that's not going to matter. All we care about is our rotos and making sure that they all move when they're supposed to move. And they do. As I watch my video, I can see that they're all moving. I'm going to go back to my scan line render here. I have my grade right below it, so I can just look at the grade. And I can see that all these parts are moving with the vehicle the way they should. Now you'll see that there's a little bit of a seam running around the side of this. And that's something, maybe I wasn't close enough on one of the shapes and it just popped out. But there's ways that we can get around correcting that kind of stuff, which we'll get to. Okay, so once I've built that shape here, okay, then it's just a matter of going through the same process we did for the first one and going through and just rotoing out that stuff. So let's look at the roto for that. Oops, back to the very beginning because that's where I drew it at. That's why it's not updating. Okay, and I redrew all of this stuff just like we did on the other one. If I go to my roto, you can see here are my shapes. Let me get rid of some of those. There we go. Okay, so I have 2 basic shapes. I have one for the back of the truck and one for the front, or 2 basic layers. Okay, because I'm looking at this as 2 different planes of movement. I have one here, and then I have one there, okay? And on my first layer, which is the side, let's hide that layer so you can see it. I have my side that I drew first. Let me get rid of this Bezier for a second. Okay, and I gave this a value of 1.25. So if I click on my side color, you'll see that this value is 1.25. So for the entire side of this truck, it's 1.25. For the hidden wheel, because it's further back, I gave that a value of, oops, it ends up being 0.98 is what I calculated it to. Is actually higher, but then once I put this other Bezier on here, where is it? Right here. You can see this Bezier is my transitional one, so that right here I'm at about 2, and then right here I'm at about 3. Okay, so as I manipulated this, you can see that these values aren't actually lining up correctly, but once I put it in my final comp, you'll see why we're going to tweak some of these settings afterwards. Okay, so right here on the front of the side of the truck, we're getting 2.5, and on the back, it's locked up, I'm getting like 1.6 or something, or 1.9. There we go. Okay, but for now that's fine. As long as we have different values, I can always come back and tweak these things in my final area. This top Bezier is again set to multiply, just like we did in the other one. Okay, now I could go through and make a new roto for this if I was experiencing difficulties, but I didn't. It actually worked out pretty good. So for my second roto, let's turn that on. I again have the areas defined, so I have the trunk here, I have the back of the trunk, and then I have the step. And these are all three things, and again, the order is obviously going to be an important thing because if these are out of order, it's not really going to match correctly. Okay, back down. All right, so there we go. So again, looking at the values of these, my trunk, there we go, has a value of 1, and the bed of the trunk has a value of 0.77, it's a little bit closer. And then the step area is 1 as well. Okay, so with these, again, I keep these numbers as kind of just a rough estimate. Once we get to the final comp, we'll come back and adjust these. So then I have my Bezier again that just kind of transitions these from this way. It's going basically, my solid shape for this one is on the right. Come on. It's right here on the right, and then it transitions that way. And again, I've set this to multiply so that I get a darker value here and a lighter value there. Okay, this is still set to RGBA, so I output my RGB. All right, so the stuff that's further away, further down, is getting a 2.2. Stuff that's closer to that corner is getting right now 0.84. Now these two, if I put them both on and just kind of hide this, and I look at these values, you can see that it goes from 2 right here to 1.3. Again, we'll tweak these things afterwards. We just have to get some rough values set in here so that we can do that kind of work. Okay, so now that I have this roto, I've gone through and I've graded it. And so the grading part, actually I didn't grade it because I undid the grade at a later point, but that's where it is. And then I shuffled, thinking, white into the alpha channel. Okay, so right now, if I look at my alpha, you'll see that it's very gray, and there's actually you know, zeros and ones that are inside here. I shuffled white into it. That way I have a solid alpha. There we go. And then for my projection, when it projects it onto that piece of geometry, it's going to be nicely cut out. Okay, so all of these, you know, you might be concerned as we're drawing these rotos and we see all these shapes kind of outside the box. That's not going to matter, okay, because outside the box is not going to be projected onto our geometry. It's just these the geometry itself that we already projected, we already created down here, this piece of geometry, that's what's getting projected on. Okay, we just have to make sure that we have a solid alpha so that when we project it, we don't get any transparency. Okay, and so there we have our truck. Okay, so again, if I adjust my f-stop here, oops. It's not adjusting it in there, I guess. It is adjusting some of the values, okay? So now I'm going to go down here to my, take this and pipe it into the scene, just like we did the other one, okay? And then I have this scanline renderer, okay? Now, for your first frame, it might work out great. Let me just disable this guy here. Okay, so this is where I'm at now. You can see that my values are not, we got a weird chunk here. I don't know why this spot is here. Oh, it's my alpha. There we go. I'm still on alpha channel. So this is nice and smooth here. Let me leave this where it's at for a second just to show I have a little bit of black space inside here. Okay, and this is where stuff just didn't line up perfectly. All right, so if I pull this down, you can really see some of the black space. You can still see the truck. You can still see that it looks like it's 3D, which is obviously ideal. In this frame right here, it looks perfect. As we get further on, though, you'll see that we're starting to cut some of this off. Okay, so what I did was I created a constant, and I could go in there and tweak this a little bit more. Obviously, if I'm seeing more of this edge, I want to do that, a little bit of tweakage. But I just put a white constant here for now, just so that I could have something in the background besides nothing. Okay, and I set the value to that to 20. So I'm going from 8 to 20. And maybe I should actually take this and make it not 20. Let's make it 15. Okay, there we go. All right, so it's a little bit more closer to that color. All right, now I could add, like I said, a roto in here. To this, and again I'll make this RGBA. I'm going to do a little shape right here off to the side. Oops. There we go. Didn't want to draw it for a second. Then I'm going to grab my feathering tool. And this is just one of those things that, you know, sometimes the button gets clicked and your feathering tool just doesn't pop up. There we go. So I can say select feather points or say select all. And I can just hit Z, and now I can grab the feathering points. There we go. Okay. So then what this is going to do is going to take my roto, and what should happen is that you can see that the color range is now going from about 3 to about 13 or so. All right. If I need to adjust that, I can always come back to my constant, and I can play with these settings. So 20, 20, and 20, and 20. And now you'll see that these numbers are actually going to be a bit higher because I pushed those values a bit higher. Okay. Once it wakes up and starts reading my values again, there we go. So now we're still at 3 here, and then we go up to about 18. I could pull this back further, pull this up more, and I won't get those values so low to 30 down on this side. Oops. I didn't like that I crossed over. There we go. Cool. All right. So now if I look at my scan line, I pull this value down, I got values that are just a bit closer to that. Okay. Now again, we still have the issue of this coloration kind of poking through, and I really don't want any coloration poking through except for my colors that I've chosen. So what I've done is way up here on top, this is where the color is coming from, okay? Because it goes into this reformat, goes into all of our rotos, and then it eventually ends up being projected onto our pieces of geometry. So all I've done is created a constant here that's white and just dropped it on there, okay? And now you'll see that we have white going around this, which, you know, in itself isn't terribly great, but once I get further down, you'll see why. So here's our scan line. Now I'm merging it, okay? And you'll see that I'm merging it with this. So this is like after you're done with the rest of this, what I've gone through and done is I had to obviously create create the 3D part for our character here. So I had to go through and I just rotoed her out. We can't really track her because she's moving and her head kind of tilts. So I did a roto shape. And right there it's kind of sloppy, but once I get a bit closer to this, okay. This is my just cutting her out. And then what I did is, here's my roto from her initially when we did it, okay. And then I dilated it just to make it a little bit thicker. I pre-multiplied it to actually cut her out. That way it's easier for me to focus on what I'm dealing with. And then what I did is shuffled black into the alpha channel, okay? Because if I didn't do that, and I went to this state, my alpha would not look right, okay? So I put a roto shape on here, and this roto shape is her shirt, okay? So I have two in this case. One of them is her shirt, the other one is her head, okay? So her shirt is just her shirt. Let me turn off this other Bezier. And this one is, right now it's at about 0.1012, because it's pretty close to the camera. Then I added this Bezier on top of it, and this one is, it's not set to multiply or anything, it's just set to the regular, well, it's not set to the regular, it's set to color burn. And what I've done is just darkened it, okay? So you can see where my initial shape is right here. And I pulled that out because I wanted to darken these areas, okay? So that's what this one's doing. And that gives me the sense that this area of her shirt is closer than this area. It's a bit further away. So you can see the difference here. And that's what we're trying to do, is just create these values. So you can't really look at it as trying to rebuild this in 2D. You have to look at it as just rebuilding values. Okay, then I did her head. Okay, and her head's done the same way. Started off rotoscoping her head, just like that. And then I created a Bezier here and pulled this back so that I would have, and this one is set to multiply. This one is really far away here and then really close back here. So we're already at like 0.6 here and 0.65. And again, I adjusted both of these colors so it looked like the hair is above this. So the hair is at 0.46. The skin back here is about 0.5. Okay. Now if it was backwards and this was further away than that, it would look weird in 3D. Okay. I always blur it. That way any, hard edges that we would have are taken care of. So there's a little bit of a blur on it. I think I only did like 4 pixels. Yeah, there we go. Pre-multiply it so it's nicely cut out. And then that part is just merged into the rest of it. Okay. So right now this is where this lineup is at. All right. So then I went through and I graded it. Okay. And then basically I just multiplied it down a bit, just so it was obviously a bit more visible. I did a filter erode on it. So you can see what that does is setting this to RGB, size of 2. It just kind of pulls in some of these values. So you see where it's white, now it's gone. Okay, so it kind of just stretches out some of those areas a bit. All right, and there, when you do a filter erode, you search for erode, and you'll get fast, filter, or blur. Typically, I'll go with filter or blur. I'd hardly ever choose fast. Okay, the big difference in these, if I go to this one, you'll see that it just has this size here. If I go to the other one, this one, I get the size, but then I also get a blur on top of it. I like to keep my blurs separate, so I typically use just this filter to erode it, and then a separate tool to blur it out. Okay, so you can see now how my colors are blending nicely right here. All right. Now let's look at that part that was underneath the car. So here we're at 0.3, and then right there under the car, way far away from it, is at 0.269. So here's where I can go all the way back up here to this roto. Go all the way back to the hidden wheel right here. go to this color, and then I can start to bump this up. So I can say 1.5, and then bring my mouse over here and check it out. This is at 0.31, that's at 0.32. So let's go a little bit higher. Let's go 2.5. Okay, so 0.44, 0.03. So any of these shapes that I'm seeing are maybe a little bit too different in color, I can come back and adjust those things. Okay, ideally what we should look at is the colors of things that are together should kind of match. So way back at the beginning here, thinking again. There we go. Let me close that. So way back at the beginning here, this tire comes down. I don't have to pull it up anymore to see it. Now it's all blurred. Let me get rid of my blur for a minute and my grade just so you can see this a little bit better. Oops, not those two. There we go. Okay, so this tire right here and this ground should be at about the same because they're about the same distance apart from the camera. These two surfaces here should be a bit closer, so 0.22 and 0.16. Now because of where they're at, as I blur them, you can see we get a nice transition here at 0.22 and then 0.18 or so. Okay, but again, if I see that I'm getting too much of a difference, I can find those areas. Okay, so this is going to be the truck part. Go back to my not the grade. Go back to my roto. Grab that side. So here's the back of the truck. Oops, the backup truck. And then I can just go through and just start tweaking values. Okay. Oops, that's the wrong direction. There we go. So now I'm at 2.22, 0.22. Okay. So now those values are going to match a bit better. So don't try to get it right in your first try. You really have to be able to just have the values set in place and then come back in later on and start tweaking the values to get them to match up. Okay. I'll go back to here. Okay, so we still have a little hard edge there, which is fine. We just didn't want to have too much of a contrast between those two things. Okay, so then we have our merge here with the female. We have a grade, and the grade, like I said, just pulls it down into something we can see. We've eroded it a bit, and then we blurred it a bit. Okay, and then from here, just going to see what this guy is. There's something I was testing out at some point. Okay, I don't need that anymore. Let's disconnect that, so I don't get confused on what I was doing with that specific thing. Okay, there we go. All right, so now we have our other part that we talked about, our one view left, one view right, our eye distort, our join view, our anaglyph. Okay, and I've adjusted my my eye distorts right here, this U scale and this UV scale here too. Okay, so I've adjusted both of those because you have to tweak it. You can't leave it at the default settings. If I put this to -10 and 10, you'll see that the top of my trees just go crazy if it's going to update. All right, even the girl right here, you can see how offset her hair is. It shouldn't be that much of an offset. Okay, so we keep it subtle. You know, you don't want people to get headaches. Okay, now because of the fact that we're offsetting each frame, you'll see, and it's going to be possibly difficult to see when we're not doing it very much, but right along the edges you're going to see a little bit of streaking happening in here. Okay, and with the streaking, it's just because we're stretching out those pixels from one to the other. Okay, let me just take this to, there we go. So now you can see there's some streaking happening right here. If I just look at this view, okay, you can definitely see some streaking happening right on this side. Now look at this view. Come on. You'll see some streaking happening on that side. Okay, so what we need to do so that we don't get this streaking is that we need to go to our anaglyph node, and right after it we need to add a crop node. Okay, so what we want to do is crop this just so we can get rid of that streaking. So the way the crop node works is you just have these little handlebars, and you can just pull these to adjust the crop of the image. So I basically just went in here and just pulled it until I was at the lines and then let go. Okay, and then the same thing for the top. There's none on the top anyway. And the same thing for the right. Just pulled it until I saw those lines go away. I also checked the reformat node. Okay, without it, it's not going to resize our document. It just keeps it right where it's at. And we don't want that. We want to reformat it so that we can again reformat it after. Come on. And get it to fit our 960 by 540 format. So I just set it to 960. I set this to fill. And there we go. So now it's filling that whole area. Now if for some reason we cropped it, let's say too much this way, okay, and we started getting some streaking, we would just go back to the crop node and just start tweaking it until we get it back to where we want that to end up at. Okay, it's actually good where it was. There we go. Okay, so perfect, laid out, good. Okay, so that's where we're going to be with this. Okay, so that's the end of it. Now we need to export this out. So we would write this out. And we're going to save this. Make sure I put it in the right folder. From nuke.pound.exr. Okay, we're saving as an EXR because that way it'll save both channels into one. Okay, so it says views left and right, that's what we want. EXR, good. We will render this, and just for the video I'm just going to render a section 170 to 188. Okay, so it's going to go through and it's going to write out all of these, and then when we go into After Effects, we should be able to put those into an actual movie. Now again, you want to test it out and make sure that everything's looking good. There are 3D glasses in the classroom, but I do recommend you get a pair if you plan on continuing to work in 3D. It's also a cool thing to have because there's lots of different areas that you can utilize 3D for different projects, and it's really kind of taken hold of the entertainment industry again with all the neat stuff that it's coming out with. Okay, and being able to convert your regular videos into 3D is just a really, really powerful tool that you can utilize. Alright, so let's wait for this thing to get done, and then we can go into After Effects and put it all together. Alright, so it's finished rendering, so I'm just going to go in After Effects and double click. Here's my EXR. Make sure it's a sequence, and you'll see that it says, zip compression, 6 channels, whatever. Drag this onto the new comp, and here is our 3D stereoscopic rendering that we could then output to a QuickTime movie. Okay, so super awesome. I don't need to actually do that because you guys know how to do that already. So it's very, very cool. Okay, so obviously you want to keep your node graph organized. I'm just kind of laid mine out this way. You know how to organize your stuff, make sure it's nice and neat. This can be a tricky one, so just take it a step at a time and really try to understand the process of it. Even the first time I did this kind of thing, it was very confusing with having all of these nodes and where do you edit stuff. Okay, so it definitely helps to keep this organized. I know that this is my truck stuff. I know that this is my this is my girl stuff. This is my truck stuff. This is my, once it unwraps, there we go. This right here is my background stuff. I don't need these two, get rid of those. Okay, and then this is the top of the chain right here where all this stuff is coming together. All the stuff that's over here, this is no longer needed. Okay, this is all my source stuff in order for me to get out my camera tracker, which we needed obviously, to get out the still camera that we're using for this. And then that's it. That's all we're getting out of there. Oh, the models obviously too. Okay, so that's what we're using all of this information for, is to be able to get that information out of there. These down here, the grades, filters, and blurs, these are all to keep us, or to adjust that filter after we're done. And then here's our source footage. So we're just dragging the source footage back in after we reformatted it, and just copying this as a depth channel. Okay, so remember we started off just building this depth channel. That's what our goal was. And we did it. We built this depth channel. So now it looks like we have some actual depth to the scene. We put it back into our original footage. And then we just split it out into the separate views. And then joined them, anaglyphed, cropped, formatted, and wrote it out. Okay. A lot of work goes into this. But the results on it are stupendous. You really appreciate it once you put the 3D glasses on. And you can see that your stuff is actually turning out to be 3D. Okay, so that's it for the video. One more thing I wanted to show, which I think is kind of a neat thing, is that whenever you do anaglyph stuff, let me scoot this off to the side here. There we go. Whenever you do anaglyph stuff, you typically have like this same format here. The crop and the reformat, those could be different for depending on the project. But this here typically is the same setup for every single thing you're doing. Just like when we have a vignette. We didn't put a vignette on this because obviously a vignette could kind of mess things up. But let me just copy this for a second. And just get you at least familiar with the concept of this. That we can take this footage, let's say we did a merge, just like we were doing a vignette. Oops. I meant to add Erode. There we go. Okay, and this both should go to that. Alright, let me just here and there. Okay. So this roto or merge is going to be set to a multiply. And then this roto here is just going to be that kind of shape. Now I'll invert it too, because I know I want to invert it. And I am missing a point. Let me just add another point right there. I can actually see the points. Okay, so here's my original, and then we've added this vignette on top of it. That doesn't look like a huge effect, but it's there. Okay, so this kind of thing is something where we could really, utilize this setup over and over and over again. Okay. So what I can do is I can take this and under Edit, I can say Group. There we go. Under Edit Node, there we go. I can go to Group, and I can say Collapse Group. Okay, and what this does is it puts it into one node graph like this. Okay, let me take this out, and you'll see that there's actually, if I unplug this, there's 3 inputs here. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this group node graph here, and you'll see that I have 3 inputs. Okay, so if you look at this, it's kind of set up the same way. We just have to keep in mind what these things are. So we don't need input 2. We can delete that. We don't need input 3. We can delete that. Okay, we do need input 1 though. Okay, and that's our footage. So I'm going to take this and go boop and boop. It's important you do the sound effects. Okay, so I have this input 1, I have my merge, I have my output, I have my roto. Okay, so then I can take that, let's go back to our node graph, and here's my group now. So this is now basically my vignette. So all I have to do is plug it in, and I'll have my vignette. Here's the before, and again, I'll wait till it stops locking up. There's the before, and there's the after. Okay, so I can just call this basically vignette, and I can use this one node anywhere that I want. So I can say, hey, here's a bunch of cool stuff. Let me just copy this, and then I can drop it wherever. Let me go way over here. I got some stuff. This is my playground. You know, you just have like an area to play with stuff, and that's where you would just have that kind of stuff. I can paste that right here, plug it in this, and then view it, and then I would have that vignette. Now obviously for this, I have some other stuff going on, so it looks kind of funky, but that's the same process. As I have this one node, plug it in wherever I, am trying to get that vignette look to it, and then I would have that. Okay, and there's even ways that we can actually export this thing out as a separate thing. Okay, we can create what are called gizmos, and we can use those to pop in and pop out of different programs to do. So you can see right here it says copy gizmo to group. We could utilize stuff like that too. For now, I just want to get you familiar with the concept of this. Okay. Now we also, you'll see that there's no settings right here. Here's the export as gizmo button right there. There's no stuff happening inside here outside of the normal stuff that we would typically see in here. There's like a font for what, for whatever this thing is called. See, let's call it hello, whatever. And that's the font for it. I could hide the input, I could cache it, I could disable it. Okay, lots of different things. But what I can also do here is I can add different things to this specific group. Okay, and eventually we'll get into creating our own custom utilities that we can utilize. So this whole setup here, there we go. This whole setup right here, which is going to be the same every single time you do a setup like this, we could group all these items together, and the hotkey is just Control-G, and you can see how much easier it is to manipulate that. Okay. Now for this, I don't want to do that. I want to keep it out for now. Okay, because we don't want to do that, because we also have the need to go into these eye distorts and to tweak these scales. Okay, so that would be something we could add to that, is that we could add controls for adjusting these eye distorts in here, and adjusting the it's not that. Well, we could adjust that too. Is the anaglyph has this amount color, so we could adjust that. The crop has its own controls. We could adjust those, and we can adjust the reformat and the blurs and all this other stuff that we can create those sliders for on our own that would allow us to do this kind of thing. Okay, so very cool stuff, right? So let's save that, and that is your stereo conversion.